In 2016, John Rooney and his 7-year-old son were attending a Detroit Tigers game together. When Rooney went to the concession stand, he grabbed a beer for himself and a Mike's Hard Lemonade for his son, unaware that it was an alcoholic beverage. When a security guard saw Rooney's son nursing the bottle of the spiked beverage, he immediately took it from him and then rushed the boy to the stadium's medical clinic. The medical clinic called an ambulance and the boy was sent to an emergency room. The doctors at the ER found no trace of alcohol in his system and were ready to release the boy to his father. But the police had other plans. According to procedure, the police were required to turn the child over to the county's Child Protective Services. Many of the officers hated the fact they had to do it, but rules are rules. County officials put the boy into a foster home for 3 days, even though the case agents didn't feel it was the right thing to do, because they had to follow procedure. A judge then ruled that the boy could be released from foster care and into his mother's custody so long as Rooney moved out of the house. Again, the judge was just following procedure in his ruling. After 2 long weeks, father and son were finally reunited. The police, county workers, and even the judge all agreed that what this family went through because of a dad's honest mistake wasn't an execution of justice, but their hands were tied. When people hear stories like this one, they're often outraged. It seems like something is wrong with society when these kinds of things happen, and there is. The cause can be traced to the disappearance of a quality the ancients called master virtue, and considered vitally necessary for the health of both society and the lives of individual men. This master virtue, which they call phronesis, has played a crucial role in all flourishing cultures in history, and is arguably needed now more than ever. What is phronesis? The ancient Greek philosophers spent a lot of time walking around in their togas discussing the nature of things, especially the nature of virtue. Take Socrates, for example. Socrates believed that man's purpose in life was to seek Sophia, or wisdom. According to Socrates and his student Plato, achieving Sophia gave a man a general understanding of the nature of virtue. And once a man reached an understanding of each of the virtues, he would naturally live them. For example, if a man understood the true nature of justice, he would naturally be just. Thus, for Socrates and Plato, becoming a man of virtue was an exercise in abstract thought. This idea of thinking your way to a virtuous life didn't jibe with Plato's student, Aristotle. While he agreed with his mentor that working to understand the nature of virtue abstractly was necessary to achieve virtue, he didn't believe it was sufficient. For Aristotle, virtuous living also required a different kind of wisdom, one that was more particular and practical than the abstract, ethereal, and general wisdom of Sophia. Aristotle called this different kind of wisdom phronesis. Phronesis has been translated different ways, prudence being the most common one, but the translation that I like best is practical wisdom. What is practical wisdom? Practical wisdom is a true characteristic that is bound up with action, accompanied by reason, and concerned with things good and bad for a human being. Practical wisdom is not concerned with the universals alone, but must also be acquainted with the particulars. It is bound up with action, and action concerns the particulars. Practical wisdom is concerned with human things and with those that about which it is possible to deliberate. He who has practical wisdom is skilled in aiming at what is best for a human being in things attainable through action, particular situations and circumstances, deliberation, action. This is the stuff of practical wisdom. It's nitty-gritty. In a way, you can say that if Sophia represents the book smarts, phronesis presents street smarts. Once you have the information, you still need to apply it correctly. Practical wisdom, the master virtue. To recap, Aristotle believed that to become a virtuous man, in addition to Sophia, or abstract wisdom, you needed phronesis, or practical wisdom. But why did he think phronesis was needed? After all, virtue is good in and of itself, right? How could you go wrong in trying to be virtuous? But in fact, every virtue can easily become a fault if not correctly applied. Frugality can veer into miserliness. Chastity can shrivel into prudishness. Self-reliance can harden into prideful stubbornness. For Aristotle, being virtuous meant avoiding these extremes by following the path between two vices, that of not applying a virtue enough and that of applying it too much. He called this finding the mean of a virtue. For example, courage is the mean between cowardliness and recklessness. Loyalty is the mean between fickleness and blind obedience. Resolution is the mean between spinelessness and obstinacy, and so on and so forth. Or, as author John Bradshaw puts it in his book, Reclaiming Virtue, practical wisdom is the ability to do the right thing at the right time for the right reason. Given that Aristotle believed that practical wisdom served as the modus operandi in making every right decision, he believed that it was the virtue that made all the other virtues possible, the master virtue. Without the correct application of practical wisdom, the other virtues would be lived too much or too little and turn into vices. The need of repercussions of existing practical wisdom aren't as abstract as you might be thinking. What should you do if your kid gets home past curfew? How does your reaction change if the reason she was late was a party as opposed to losing track of time talking to a friend? What would you do if your spendthrift brother asked for money? What if he has 3 kids to feed? Whether you're a doctor trying to figure out a course of treatment for a patient based on their unique circumstances, a teacher trying to figure out how to reach your students, or a father trying to do your best by your kids, all our day-to-day deliberations require practical wisdom as we seek to choose the best possible course of action in every given set of circumstances. Why seek practical wisdom? Even within institutions and organizations that are heavy of choice restraining rules and regulations, you often still are faced with making decisions where the right thing to do isn't clear. And once you leave home, nobody is going to tell you what to do in your personal life, and plotting the best course between pragmatic and moral pitfalls rests entirely on your shoulders. Your ability to make decisions using practical wisdom will thus have an outsized influence on how your life ends up. The better your decisions, the more you will progress, the more of your potential you will use, and the more your life will flourish. In short, practical wisdom is the path to true happiness and distinction. If you find value in this content, please don't forget to like and subscribe. 6 essential ingredients of practical wisdom. Here are the 6 skills and attributes a person needs to develop in order to become practically wise. According to Aristotle, practical wisdom requires the following: knowing the goal of a role or objective. While every person has the general goal of eudaimonia, each individual also has an objective that is unique to his role in life. The objective of a teacher is to help students learn and enrich their minds to his utmost ability. The objective of a janitor is to clean a building the best he can. The goal of a dad is to raise his children with excellence. If you don't understand what your aim is, you will never achieve it. Perception. Remember, practical wisdom for Aristotle is concerned with particular situations. To know how to act in a particular situation, We need to deftly perceive and understand the circumstances before us. What are the facts in this case? What's the history here? How do others feel about it? An informed intellect. Aristotle believed that an understanding of absolute truth was necessary in order to be practically wise. Absolute truths act as boundaries for us while we exercise practical wisdom. Understanding absolutes requires an informed intellect. We inform our intellect of these absolutes by contemplating the nature of every virtue and vice. Experience. Practical wisdom also emphasizes on particulars, which come to be known as a result of experience. But a young person is inexperienced. A long period of time creates experience. Aristotle firmly believed that practical wisdom could only be gained through experience. He often likened practical wisdom to a skill like carpentry or masonry. You can't just read a book about carpentry and expect to become a master carpenter. You actually have to get into a shop and start working with tools and wood to do that. So it is with practical wisdom. You become more and more practically wise the more decisions you make, the more you experience, and this is key, the more you learn from your experiences. Getting your degree in practical wisdom requires enrollment in the School of Hard Knocks. Deliberative skills. According to Aristotle, the person skilled in deliberating would in general also be practically wise. The heart of practical wisdom is deliberation. Practical wisdom requires that we deliberate with ourselves the best course of action to take in a given situation. We weigh both sides of an issue. We examine the salient factors. We listen to our conscience. Deliberation is a skill that we become more adept at through experience. Action. All the reasoning and careful deliberation in the world isn't worth a lick to Aristotle if you don't take action. Over and over again, it has been proven practical wisdom is bound up with action. It's not enough to know what the wise thing to do is. You must actually do it. Nurturing practical wisdom in your life. There are many things you can do to develop your own practical wisdom, such as learning critical thinking skills, refining your goals and core values, expanding your intellect, and always being sure to understand the circumstances of a situation as much as possible before making a decision.